And if it's okay, I'm gonna go ahead and kind of jump right into the message this morning. I think everybody has found a seat. Is there still some, if you have an empty seat beside you, can you just kind of raise your hand or maybe even tuck into the middle a little bit? I know I still see some people kind of standing up back there, and we would love for everybody to be able to find a seat if we can. I appreciate it. Look for one of those hands that was just raised. We want you to have a seat. I'm kicking off a new series today, and I'm calling this series Welcome Home. Everybody say welcome home. I would venture to guess that most of us in this room that are over the age of 40 have some sort of a story about running away from home. Back in the day, this just seemed to be something we did on a regular basis. So, some of you might have ran away from home every week. I don't think this necessarily happens so much anymore, and I think part of the reason is because, we have so much more awareness of all the evil that exists in the world, with social media and everything. So we tend nowadays to keep a little bit of a tighter rein on our kids. But back in the day, it wasn't out of the ordinary for me to travel about 10 blocks away from my home just to go hang out with a buddy. And therefore, the world kind of seemed a little bit more accessible and big to us. Now, you should know this. When I was growing up, my mom isn't here right now. She'll be here in the 11 o'clock service. I was a mama's boy growing up. Oh, she is here. Was I not a mama's boy growing up? I did not like to be that far away from my mommy, which I called her mommy for far too long. I don't know why you let me, I was like 14 or 15. Mommy. Finally, my brother said, we should probably start calling them mom and dad. Like, okay, if you insist. I can remember one time being invited over to my good buddy's Luke Blosser's house to spend the night. And I remember being excited. I packed my bag and I went over to his house, and I remember binge watching Dukes of Hazzard all night long. Now, we didn't have Netflix or even the internet back then. Luke had every episode of Dukes of Hazzard recorded onto VHS tapes. And I remember his parents made us these big giant bowls of popcorn, and we watched Dukes of Hazzard all night long. I remember playing outside, playing basketball, playing video games, but I also remember when it started to get dark outside. The reality sort of started to set in that I was about to sleep somewhere else outside of my house, and I didn't like it. So I went into their kitchen and asked to use their phone, which was attached to a cord, a base on the kitchen. And I called my mommy and said, you gotta come pick me up. I can't sleep here. I don't know if you remember that story. And my mom drove 1 block from my home to come pick me up. I was a mama's boy, and yet despite this, I can remember sometimes as a young boy being punished and being sickened by the injustice that was brought down by my parents, and it was too much to bear. Some of you know exactly what I'm talking about. And I was a middle child, any middle children in the room, so we had it worse. I had it worse than my siblings, my older brother and my younger brother. All I did was tell a little lie, and that warrants my Nintendo being taken away? What kind of monster are you? I come home with 1D in social science, and I can't watch Saturday morning cartoons. That was like the only thing we had to look forward to as a kid. You had to wait till Saturday morning to watch cartoons. Some of you remember that. Don't take Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles away from me, Mom. It's too much. And I would decide that the punishment that was brought down was too much to bear. So I would go into my room and I would pack a bag and I would head out the door. And I would make it about 2 doors down before remembering that I couldn't even stay the night at a good friend's house with a safe family. I'm sure many of us in this room have some funny stories about running away from home. But I'm sure there's also some tragic stories as well. For you did not go into your room and pack a backpack full of G.I. Joes and your favorite doll and some snacks only to go sit inside the neighbor's house for a few hours until you came to your senses. You actually did it. You were convinced that life on the run was the better life, so you started running, only to discover that you were wrong. I've entitled this message, Runaway. But I'm not gonna talk this morning about funny childhood runaway stories per se. I want to talk to those who perhaps have chosen to run away from your spiritual home, from your faith. Those of you that have chose to run away from God. Open up with me to Luke chapter 15 if you have your Bibles with you. If not, there's a good chance there's one underneath your chair if you want to sort of follow along. It's the tiniest printed Bible that I've ever experienced, so I hope you wore your glasses or brought a magnifying glass, but I'm telling you, it'll do. Jesus loved to tell stories. Jesus loved to tell stories called parables, and he would do this in order to teach important things about his kingdom, his truth, in a way that people could better understand it. And in Luke chapter 15, he tells three different stories, three different parables. The first one is about a shepherd who lost a sheep. Most of his sheep were safe, but there was one sheep that was missing, and Jesus in this story notes that the shepherd left all of his other sheep and went to search for that one sheep. The next story that Jesus tells is about a woman who lost a coin, one measly coin, but this one measly coin was important enough that she did not stop looking until she found the coin. And when she found the coin, Jesus notes that she celebrated, and she called her friends to celebrate with her. But the last story that Jesus tells in Luke chapter 15 is my favorite. It's a powerful story. Some of you, most of you, I would even venture to guess, have heard this story at one time or the other. It's sort of a famous story. We often refer to this story as the prodigal son. And this story gives us a picture of what happens when we run from God. I should note this before I start reading it for those who haven't heard it. In this story, the Father represents God, and the Son, you guessed it, represents us. And the story goes like this. In verse 11, we read, there was a man who had two sons, and the younger son said to his father, Father, give me my share of the estate. He wanted it early. Apparently, this father had a lot of money. And when the father died, this money would, of course, been transferred as an inheritance to his two sons. But the younger son decides, I don't want to wait. I want my money right now. Now, the Bible doesn't give a name for this son, so I figured I would just slap a random name on this son. We're going to call him Scott, just for the sake of this story. Just completely random, right? And Scott decides, I want my money now. Now, we should understand that, especially in this culture, this would have been like the worst insult. Essentially, what this son was saying is, Dad, I don't care if you're dead or alive. That's not important to me. All that's important to me is my money. Dad, I want my money, and I don't want to wait for it. I want it now. Give it to me now. And the father, of course, couldn't force his son to stay, to make the right decision, to do it right. So he divided the money, and he gave his younger son his share. Scott got what he wanted, money. In verse 13, we read this, not long after this, the younger son got together all he had and set out for a distant country. This was more than just going to see the world. This was Scott abandoning the way of thinking, believing, and acting that he had been taught up until that point. Everything that his father stood for, this was Scott saying, I am leaving all of that behind, and I am going to carve my own path. I've pastored for a little over 11 years. And in that time, I've seen many people run from God. It's heartbreaking. I've watched teenagers and young adults run from God. I've watched moms and dads run from God. I've watched grandmas and grandpas even run from God, run from their spiritual home. I don't know all the reasons, but I've listened to a lot of their stories. Some people tell me they ran simply because they didn't want God's boundaries. They didn't want God's restrictions or rules. It's just too hard to follow God because I can't do many of the things that I want to do, so they ran. Others run because disappointment with people translates to them as anger towards God. Somebody wronged them. and they equated them to God, and they ran. Those type of runaways seem to break my heart the most. Others run simply because it's easier to run than face the results of failure. They fear rejection, so they flee rejection. Maybe I'm describing you in some of these things. Sometimes people run because of addictions. Something else takes control over them, so they no longer have control. Some run out of habit. It's just what they've done their whole life. They simply ran. Oftentimes, this is a learned behavior. Their parents run. Since they ran, they are taught to run. Parents, we need to understand that what we do doesn't happen in a vacuum. Our kids are watching. Our kids are learning from us. So often when we run, they eventually run. Lastly, some people run simply because they are lonely. It's not so much that they are running from something, rather they're running to something. What they don't have seems better than what they do have. And fantasy trumps reality. Running from God, we need to know this. Our spiritual home produces consequences, doesn't it? Maybe not right off the bat, but it always produces consequences. The first consequence we see produced is that we leave home. And I know what you're thinking, well, duh. Isn't that kind of the point of running away? We're trying to get away from home. But the reality is when we leave home, we also leave the safety of home. When we leave our spiritual home, when we run from God, we step out of God's protection. It's not that God doesn't want to protect us, but we run from it. We step out of his hand of protection. The second thing that happens is we leave the security of home. When I think about security of home, I think about just belonging, this place that I belong. In Psalm 91:1, we see this incredible promise. Those who dwell in the shelter of the Most High will be made secure and rest in the shadow of the Almighty. That is an incredible promise, but did you notice it's a promise with a condition? Those that dwell in the shelter, those that live with God, those that stay with God. When we step out of the shelter or the house of the Most High, we in turn are stepping out of the shadow and the security of the Most High. We also leave the blessing of home when we run. Growing up, my dad would remind me often that there were blessings that came from living in my parents' home. My dad paid for the food, a whole bunch of it. My mom did my laundry for far too long, looking back, if I'm being honest, for far too long. My parents paid for the electricity that I used. They paid for the water that I used. They paid for the clothing that I wore. I used to watch my dad's TV in his living room, sitting on his couch, breathing his air. Those were blessings that I didn't really think were blessings when I was growing up, but I knew this. I knew the deal. If I ran from home, I was also running from the blessings. He would still love me. My parents would still love me, but the blessings came because I lived in their home under their rules. And my parents would have been foolish to allow me to live by my rules the way I wanted and still receive all of their blessing. When you run from God, you run from his blessing. He wants to bless you, but he can't. We choose to refuse the blessing of home. I've seen so many people come and experience God. I've seen so many people come and be loved by us and loved by the church only to walk away. And the truth is, we still love them. They're just not here to experience it. When we run from God, he doesn't stop loving us. His love is unconditional. We're just not there to experience it. We're just not there to feel it. And look what happens when Scott ran. Once again, not long after that, the younger son got together all he had and he set out for a distant country. And there he squandered his wealth in wild living. Scott did not run away to become a rabbi or a missionary. Scott ran away to party. Scott ran away to live what in his mind was the good life. We don't know how long it took him to squander things away, but apparently it did not take long. And we can look at Scott this morning and say, well, that wasn't very smart. No, it wasn't. But can I tell you this? It was predictable. It's just what happens when we run. You do things you never thought you would do. You do things you never planned to do. You make bad decisions. It's just one of the consequences when we run from God. I've seen it over and over again in people's lives that have ran from God. When they finally come back, they say things like this: what in the world made me do that? Why did I spend my money on that? Why did I marry this person? How did I ever make that decision? But the truth is, when you decide to run, you are convinced it's going to be worth it. But you end up making bad decisions and, dare I say, do dumb things. It's just what happens when we run. Look what it says in verse 14. After he had spent everything. Eventually, Scott lost everything. And again, can I tell you, this is just part of the pattern. It's just part of the pattern when we run from God. When we run from God, we lose. I've heard so many stories of people that have ran. Some say they lost money. Some say they lost relationships. Some say they lost their families. Some say they lost a job or a career. Some say they lost their innocence. Some say they lost their reputation. Over and over again, their story, maybe it's a little bit different, but it all involves one thing: they lost. It's what happens when we run from God. We lose. It's painful to watch. My heart is broken over Runaways and what we see their decision cost them. And once again, for Scott, we see the costs. They continue to pile up. It says after he had spent everything, there was a severe famine in the whole country and he began to be in need. Now we read that Scott is not only broke, now he's starving. He never considered this possibility. This was not his plan. Yet we see now his plans failed. When we run from God, our plans always eventually fail. When I was 18, I ran from God myself. Some of you know my testimony. I ran from God and I ran far from God. I would have told you at the time that the reason I ran is because the church hurt me. Some of you might have a story that goes a little something like that. At the time, I would have said, the reason I ran is because people in the church hurt me. But looking back, I know now it was 100% because of my pride. And I ran. I ran towards alcohol. That did not fulfill me. When that wasn't enough, I ran towards drugs. That made things even worse. I ran to relationships to fill the empty space in my heart, but some of you know where that's going. I ended up more empty than ever. I've never met somebody who said, I'm so glad I ran from God. Everything worked out so great. I'm yet to meet someone that said, man, running from God, it was just the best decision I ever made. Man, my life is so much better now that I ran from God. I've never heard anybody say that. What I have heard people say is I've ran from God and man, now I'm experiencing the consequences. And sometimes when we experience those consequences, we do this. We blame God. God's the reason things fell apart, but we need to remember God did not do this to us. We ran from his protection. We ran from his blessing. It's just simply what happens when we run. At Harbor Church, we teach this, that blessing follows obedience. God's love is unconditional all the time, but his blessings follow obedience. But what this story also teaches us is disobedience is followed by consequences. There is a connection, a direct connection between what is happening in your life and what you have decided to believe about God. Scott ran because he felt like he had enough blessing surplus. So much that he did not need his father any longer. He certainly did not need his father's horrible rules and restrictions. He didn't need the accountability. He could do this on his own, but we read that his plans failed. I think we would all agree that the best option that he had right now would have clearly been to just go home, right? To just go home. To cut his losses and say, you know what? I tried things my way, but I'm not gonna go, but I just need to go home. But that's not what he did. I don't know if it was pride that stopped him. Maybe it was just pure stubbornness. But we read in verse 15, what he did instead was he went and hired himself out to a citizen of that country who sent him to his field to feed pigs. Can you imagine how embarrassing that must have been? Scott was loaded. He was the party guy for a time. He had it all, and I'm sure that would have drawn a lot of friends around him, you know, because people like the party guy. People like the guy that's the life of the party and the guy that can even keep the party going, you know, because he's got deep pockets. This was Scott for a while, but now we see Scott not surrounded by friends, instead surrounded by pigs. And I imagine by this time, he's feeling a lot of shame. Most of the time, I think the biggest obstacle for runaways is shame. They're ashamed of the decisions that they've made. They're ashamed of the mistakes that they've made. And they allow that shame to hold them back. What will people think, they say? Can I tell you, people that are genuine followers of Jesus will celebrate you when you come home. People that are genuine followers of Jesus will do nothing but celebrate you and embrace you when you come home. You need to know that. Because so often for the runaway, shame and regret, guilt, it's the very thing that holds them back. People won't accept me now. Genuine followers of Jesus certainly will. Are there going to be haters? Yeah. There always is, right? I don't listen to the haters. You shouldn't either. Maybe they just need to find a hobby. Or maybe what they really need is to truly find Jesus. But I can tell you this, they're not worth listening to. People that would question your past, people that would question your now commitment, they are not worth listening to. Look what happens in verse 16. He's not only feeding the pigs, he's so hungry that it says he longed to fill his stomach with the pods that the pigs were eating, but no one gave him anything. Now, wait a minute. Where's all the friends that Scott partied with? Where were they at? Where is all the friends that Scott would go out and get drunk with and probably be the guy buying all the drinks because he had daddy's inheritance? Where are those people? Apparently they're nowhere to be found. And can I tell you, this is not out of the ordinary. The people who got drunk with you won't want to detox with you. The people that were there celebrating you while you were partying will not be there when you hit rock bottom. It's just a reality. But look what it says in verse 17. When he came to his senses. When he came to his senses. I remember the moment when I came to my senses, when I realized that everything I was running to was failing me. When I realized that everything I was running to because I was lonely was only producing more loneliness. That I was running to things that I thought would fill empty spaces in me, and yet they were only making me feel more empty. Now, don't get me wrong. Life was fun at times. Sin is always fun for a season. Running from God will be fun for a season. But it always ends with loneliness. It always ends with consequences. I might have looked like I was having fun in that season, but on the inside, I was lonely. I had no hope. But what I did have was a foundation. What I did have was a foundation that was built on Jesus. I'm so thankful that one of the rules for living in my parents' house was, boy, you're gonna be in church. Because it was there that I first learned about Jesus and the love that he has for me. It was there that I first learned that God created me, and he didn't just create me randomly, he created me for a purpose. It was there that this foundation was built in me. And I began to remember that I once had hope before I ran. If I'm being honest, I thought it was too late for me then. But I remember in my misery one Sunday morning, stumbling back into church. And if I'm being honest, like when I say stumbled back into church, I somewhat mean literally. I'm pretty sure, I remember this day, I'm pretty sure I was still somewhat drunk from the night before. But something woke me up, feeling more alone than I have ever felt. I had disqualified myself from all of God's love, but something drew me there that day. And I remember pulling into the parking lot and having thoughts that were sort of like this: when I walk in that door, let the lecture start happening, God, I'm ready for him. Because that's what I almost hoped would happen, because it would have proved everything all of the reasons that I originally ran. But that's not what happened. I walked in the door and there was a group of men that greeted me and hugged me and looked at me and said something like this: welcome home. I was a little bit angry, if I'm being honest, because they were shattering what I wanted to have happen when I walked through that door. One man even pulled me off to the side, said, hey, Scott, can I talk to you for just a second in private? And as I was walking away from this group of men, I was thinking, here comes the lecture. This man knows everything that I've been doing. Here comes the lecture. But he pulled me off to the side, and I'll never forget this. He handed me a piece of gum. And he said, Scott, I've been where you are. And I could smell last night on you still. And I just want to look out for you, because I'm so glad you're here. I didn't deserve that kindness. I didn't deserve in that moment or any moment the love of God that was now being shown through an old friend. Why did he do that? Because he recognized that I was a man that was starting to come to my senses. What will it take for you to come to your senses? How many relationships do you have to destroy? How much do you have to lose? How many bad decisions do you have to make before you come to your senses? Watch what he does. It says in verse 17, when he came to his senses, he said, how many of my father's hired servants have food to spare? How many of the people that work for my dad have so much food that they can give it away? And here I am starving to death. I think it's time to come to my senses. So he comes up with this incredible idea. He said, I know what I'll do. I'm gonna go back to my father and I'm gonna say to him, Father, I have sinned against God. I've sinned against you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. He was saying, look, Father, I know that I blew it. And I know that there is very little left for me as far as blessings go. But God, if you would just make me one of your workers, or Father, if you would just make me one of your workers, if you would just make me like one of your hired servants. So he got up and he went to his father. Even if I just get a job with my dad, it's better than this. I'm going home. Can I tell you that that's the message of this story? That no matter how far you've ran, no matter how many bad decisions you've made, no matter how many costly mistakes you've made, you can always come home. You can always come home. And I get it, for some of you, your biggest fear is this. What's God even gonna say to me? How would he ever react to me? I mean, I'm a filthy mess. I've sinned so much. I've betrayed God so much. What will God do? I'm gonna show you what God will do. Let's jump ahead to verse 20. We read this. While Scott was still a long ways off, his father saw him and was filled with not anger, not resentment. It says that his father was filled with compassion for him. And he didn't wait for Scott to come to him. It says that he ran to his son. He threw his arms around him and he kissed him. Can I tell you this morning, that's what God will do when you decide to come home. That's what the church will do when you decide to come home. We will embrace you. We will love you. We will welcome you home. Why? Because that's the very thing that God did for every one of us. Some of you are thinking, I don't deserve that kind of love. Can I tell you, I didn't either. And yet he gave it to me anyways, in spite of me. Can I remind us today of one other runaway story? This is not a story of a son running from his father, but yet a father running towards his children. It's the story of Easter. It's the story of God's relentless pursuit of us. It's the story of Jesus, who willingly left the safety and the security and even the glory of heaven to come to earth on our behalf. Jesus lived a perfect, sinless life. And yet, instead of receiving a crown, he received a cross. Jesus bled, suffered, and died. Not because he ran from God, but because we did. It's the story of Easter, but not the whole story. It's not the end of the story. Jesus did not remain dead. Just a few days later, on the third day, Jesus rose from the grave, conquering sin, conquering death, proving once and for all that no matter how far you have ran, you are not too far from God's love. You are never too far from God's redemption. The Easter story is this: you can come home. The door is open. The Father is watching and waiting. It's your invitation to stop running away from him and to start running towards him. The resurrection is your assurance that you don't have to stay in the pig pen. You don't have to live with the regret and shame. You can come home to a God that runs towards you and a church that will do the same. God's message is this: you are welcome home. You are welcome home. Everybody is welcome home. I don't care what you've done. I don't care what your past looks like. God doesn't care what your past looks like. God doesn't even care what your present looks like. He's just thankful that you're here, hearing his message of love over you. When Jesus died on that cross, God's plan was complete. God's move was made. The question that remains today is this: what's your move? God gives us free will. So that means if you want to keep running, you can keep running. But there's another option: come home. Head back towards the Father who is already running towards you today. Can we stand? I want to talk to some people in this room that you've been running. Maybe I've described you in some ways this morning. Maybe when I talked about some of the reasons that people run from God, you were like, man, this guy's talking about me. Maybe when I described some of the consequences that we experience when we run from God, your first thought was, I'm experiencing those. Maybe you've ran so far that you're experiencing all the consequences. Maybe you're just starting out on the journey, but now you're saying, oh man, I can see some of these patterns already starting to form in my life. I want to invite you today. Let me rephrase that. God is inviting you today to come home. Can we just close our eyes for just a moment? I just want to create an atmosphere of intimacy in this room. The person sitting next to you, they're standing next to you, the person on the other side of the room, they don't matter right now. All that matters is what happens in this moment between you and Father God, the God who created you, who formed you in your mother's womb. And the God that right now is inviting you, come home. Man, if that's you and you need to make that decision today, there is a church that's ready to celebrate with you. More importantly than that, heaven is ready to celebrate you. And it starts with a decision to stop running from God and to make the decision to now run to God. Man, if that's you and you need to make that decision, I wanna pray with you. I wanna help get you started on that journey. But I'm gonna ask you to do something that's kind of brave. Oftentimes I think when we make big decisions in our life, and this is the biggest decision that you will ever make, it helps if we just sort of have some movement to it so that we remember the moment. I'm gonna invite you, if that's you and you need to make Jesus your Lord and Savior today, if you need to stop running and run back to God, would you do something brave? Would you just raise your hand? Awesome, man. Go ahead and keep them up for a second. Don't be bashful about it. This is the biggest decision that you've ever made. By the way, it's the best decision that you've ever made. It's not a moment where we just kind of be shy about it. This is an incredible moment for you. This is the moment I believe that God begins to change your life, that God begins to restore everything that the enemy tried to steal from you, but God wouldn't have it. I'm gonna pray a prayer, and I'm just gonna invite those that raise their hand and the rest of this room to simply just repeat this prayer after me. Why do we do this? Because the Bible says if we believe in our heart that Jesus is Lord and we confess with our mouth, then we can be saved. That's what we're gonna do. We're just gonna have a simple time of confession. God, thank you for loving me. I don't deserve it, but you give it so freely anyways. God, I believe that Jesus Christ is your son. And I believe that he came to earth and lived a perfect sinless life. And also that he, Jesus, became a perfect sacrifice for me. God, I'm repenting of my sinful life today. While I receive the forgiveness that you paid for on that cross, I'm not going back to my old ways. I'm done with that life. I'm running to the Father as you run towards me. Jesus, thank you for salvation that came at such a great cost. I'm gonna live a life that honors the sacrifice that you made. In Jesus' name. And everybody said amen. Come on, can we celebrate those that made that decision?